just got to begin to chase a dream that is bigger than you.
Thank you so much, Trish. I'm really excited to be here. And I want you guys to all pat yourselves on the back for taking the time to join today. I know everybody's very busy, but your health and your wellness definitely should come first. And you should just acknowledge yourself for showing up, because that's half the battle. So today our topic is the benefits of a 21-day whole food challenge. And we're going to dive into I think, maybe you saw the flyer promoting what we're doing today, but we're going to dive into all things related to why 21 days, what are the benefits, how to get started. We'll have some time for questions at the end. And so as I'm going through the content, if you're thinking of questions, just feel free to add them to the chat. I'll plan to answer all the questions at the end. But as Trish mentioned, a little bit about me, I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I'm also a holistic health coach. My specialties include disease prevention, intuitive eating, as well as gut health. And as Trish mentioned, I'm available for private nutrition coaching and a variety of workshops that I hope we will be conducting throughout the course of the year. And I do have a survey that I hope you guys can have a moment to complete at some point after the presentation's over. And that way you can give some feedback on some topics that you're interested in learning more about. So as I alluded to, here's our agenda. We're going to cover the specifics on what are whole foods. It sounds very basic, but you'd be surprised at what marketers and food manufacturing companies are passing off as whole foods today that are not actually whole foods. We're going to talk about why 21 days. Is that an arbitrary number? Why did we choose 21 days for this challenge? Go through the myriad of benefits. There are 10 specific benefits that I'd like to point out to you today. And then I'd really like to have you equipped with some tools to get you started on this journey. I always like to kick off presentations with quotes, because I feel like a very well-timed and worded quote can be impactful with regard to just kind of distilling a lot of content down into a very simple message. Michael Pollan did this very well in his book. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with Food Rules. Ironically enough, he is not a nutrition science expert, but he's a very well-known author. He's published 8 books. Many of them were New York Times bestsellers. And in his book, Food Rules, he reminds us all in his extensive research that he's done on the food systems in this country and how it's evolved over the course of decades here, that if we just eat real food, mostly plants and not too much, we are good. So regardless of all those fad diets that you are reading about and all those influencers on Instagram and TikTok that are trying to promote supplements and pushing keto and paleo and all these like wild eating patterns in front of you, you can rest assured that if you stick to this message, that you'll be in good hands. So what are whole foods? Whole foods are foods that have not been processed in any way. That includes packaging, it includes heat, any kind of chemical additives, derivatives, artificial ingredients. They're usually higher in nutrient density and fiber and lower in sodium. Now, with regard to the reality of how we live and eat today, it would be unrealistic and not really desirable for us to eat strictly whole foods in their purest sense, because, we're all busy. We like to go out to dinner. We like to enjoy good food, and we don't want to give ourselves eating disorders. We don't want to walk around shaming ourselves for enjoying something delicious to eat at a birthday party or going out to dinner to reward yourself after a long, hard work week. So my talk here is as much about balance as it is about sharing information that I hope you'll find helpful for your health. So I like to use the 80-20 rule when I talk about, having a balanced diet. So whole foods and processed foods is a whole continuum here. On the left, you have the far extreme pure whole foods. So that's fresh fruits, vegetables, pasture-raised eggs, whole grains, grass-fed meats, chicken, nuts, beans, wild fish, and the like. Those foods, if you buy them in their purest sense, are considered whole foods, and that's the best quality nutrition you can put into your body. One step down from that, we've got foods that are minimally processed where there are no additives per se, but heat could be applied in the case of in olive oil, for example. If you look into the manufacturing practices of many olive oil producers, a lot of them are using machinery that introduces heat, and heat introduces a chemical reaction, and there's oxidation that takes place. So that does change the chemical composition of the oil, and it's a little bit less nutrient dense and a little more oxidized. So when you're shopping for things like olive oil, look for keywords like cold pressed. You want to look for things like first cold pressed and organic to avoid pesticides. And by doing that, you can still feel good that you're consuming a whole food like food without any of the inflammatory components that we want to avoid. Similarly, when you're buying things like wheat flour or corn flour or juices, these are foods that are derived from whole foods, but they've been altered in some ways because they're not, in some ways, they might not have the fiber from the original food in the case of a juice, or with a whole wheat flour, depending on how long it's been sitting on the shelf, it could be, degraded with regard to the enzymes and the nutrient value that it would have when it's originally, like say it's stone milled or something like that. So when you think about the balance of your plate and your shopping cart, 80% of your foods, you want those to be as whole as possible, like all the way here on the left. And then we can start to look at the 20% encompassing as you go down the line. The next grade of processing here is when a food is processed and then packaged with some additional added ingredients, but minimal. So when you talk about yogurts and good quality cheeses, pasta and bread, the really good quality brands do not add many preservatives or additives. It's essentially whole food based ingredients that have been combined into a recipe, if you will. So if you stick to those brands that are not adding a lot of preservatives, and as fresh as possible, then we're good. And avoiding sugar when it comes to things like yogurt. And we can go into that a little bit further in some upcoming slides. But then all the way to the right, we've got our ultra processed packaged foods that do have many additives, cakes, cookies, salad dressing, and pre-made meals. These are all under this category, and we want to aim for 20% or less in terms of the volume of consumption in our diet. So why did we decide on 21 days for this challenge? Science does tell us that it takes 21 days to either make or break a habit. So when we commit to 3 weeks, we're allowing these healthy habits to form, and we're also allowing our brain to be rewired to accept these new habits in place of old habits. It's also an opportunity for us to reset our taste buds and reduce cravings for the really high fat foods. You'll find that if you stick to this for 3 weeks, you'll actually find a really sweetened beverage or really sweet dessert. You might find it unpalatable. It might seem too much for you because your taste buds have been reprogrammed, if you will, to appreciate the simple flavors in a piece of fresh fruit or whatnot. So it's very interesting to put your taste buds to this test. I actually remember switching to a more whole foods, plant-based diet many years ago and noticing that shift, and can enjoy a lot of very simple flavors now without a lot of additives, especially if the produce is in season and really ripe. With regard to the benefits of eating whole foods, like I said, there are so many, but we're just going to touch on 10 for the interest of time. Saving money, that's definitely top priority for so many of us right now with inflation and all the rising costs of energy. You can't leave the grocery store without spending a few $100s anymore. So we're all interested in saving money, I'm sure. We're all very conscious of what's better for the environment with, climate change just being something that we're all starting to notice is shifting. It's definitely something that we all want to be paying attention to. A benefit with regard to your energy, you will feel more energetic when you eat with this eating pattern. You will naturally lose weight, reduce inflammation in your body, sleep better, improve your mood, your immune function will improve, you'll have better gut health, and as another benefit, you'll discover some exciting new flavors that you might not have otherwise tried. Regarding saving money, so a lot of people think that buying fresh produce can be really expensive. When you really break it down and you look at the cost of in-season produce that's local, you're not paying for shipping, you're not paying for marketing, you're not paying for packaging if you're buying the produce out of a, if it's not bagged up or sliced up or processed in any way. So dollar for dollar, you get a better bang for your buck if you stick to whole foods in their natural state. With regard to the environment, whole foods do not require huge factory setups or complex machinery to put together. You're building, you're farming and you're cultivating soil. It's all a very natural process. So that it actually fights climate change. If we, think about composting and the ways that we can remineralize the soil, and continue to invest our time and energy into consuming foods that are organic and, in line with Mother Nature's plan for us. Processed foods do have a high level of carbon footprint given the transportation that's required to get them from point A to point B. And they're also, made with very cheap plastic packaging, which also creates massive pileup of waste. And it's currently a massive problem because we mismanage this plastic and we don't have any place to put it. It's ending up in the oceans, and microplastics are actually ending up in our bodies. Those plastics, you might think it's harmless to buy a package of cucumbers that are covered with a layer of plastic, but that plastic is making contact with your food, and those microparticles eventually do enter into your bloodstream. So we want to avoid that as much as possible. Another benefit is we gain energy. Whole foods are more bioavailable and they're better assimilated for our body. It's easier for our body to break down an apple than it is to break down a candy bar. That is just a well-known fact. Whole foods are associated with better blood sugar balance. Whole foods have higher fiber content, and they don't have added sugar. So you'll have more consistent energy levels throughout the day if you stick to a high fiber whole food diet that has lots of fresh ingredients. So naturally, you will lose weight if you adopt this eating pattern. If you're replacing high fat, high sugar, ultra processed and palatable food, hyper palatable foods with high fiber and nutrient dense whole foods, it's going to lead to better satiety and better blood sugar balance, as I mentioned, which does contribute to appetite control. When your blood sugar is balanced, you have a better ability to understand when you're actually hungry or not. So that's a really important metric to pay attention to. And just remember that 1 gram of fat is 9 calories and 1 gram of carb or protein is 4. So if you're going to eat a processed food that's high in saturated fat or any kind of fat, really, you're automatically twice the calories for the most part. And if you do the math, that's going to mean less food, but more calories over time, which is kind of the opposite of what most of us want. And this picture just kind of depicts that in more detail. You could opt for a calzone for 841 calories or 8 cups of grapes. Imagine eating 8 cups of grapes. You probably wouldn't want to do that, but it just goes to show you that the calories associated with 8 cups of grapes, you wouldn't want to consume that many grapes. Mother Nature did not intend for us to do that, but you would be too full to eat all of that. But yet in a hyper palatable, high saturated and high sugar type of food, you could eat something like that, eat all those calories, and then be hungry 20 minutes later. Same for Snickers and bagels, 242 calories in a Snickers. That's the equivalent of 60 cherries. That is just a crazy comparison if you think about it. 1 bagel is equal to 5 cucumbers. You would never eat that many cucumbers in one sitting. the water content alone and the fiber, your belly would just be completely distended. And it's just an analogy for you to understand that when you're eating whole foods, they're nutrient dense, but when you're eating processed foods, they're calorie dense. So try to keep that in mind. Another benefit of consuming whole foods, you're naturally reducing the inflammation in your diet. Inflammation is caused by many things in our environment: chronic stress, if someone's a smoker, if they're socially isolated, deprived of sleep, constantly in a state of lack of physical activity, or exposed to toxins in the environment. Those are all contributing factors, but by and large, the biggest contributing factor is a poor diet. And what I mean by poor diet is what we've been talking about here: high sugar, high omega-6 fatty acids and trans fats, i.e. the fats that you find in the seed oils, in those processed foods, and then also things like processed meats, but lower in the fiber and the omega-3 fatty acids in the fruits and vegetables. And why does this matter? Inflammation is at the root cause of all the chronic conditions that our country is plagued with. So type 2 diabetes, heart disease, cancer, arthritis, body aches and pains, depression, anxiety, digestive problems, things like constipation, diarrhea, acid reflux, you name it. There's a drug out there, a pill for every ill. We're not talking about going that route. We're talking about addressing the root cause before it becomes a problem and fixing it at the core, alleviating those symptoms, not even giving those diseases a chance to develop. Another benefit here is improved sleep. So high inflammation is actually associated with reduced REM, which stands for rapid eye movement. That's the stage of sleep when your body is actually taking memories and recording them into long-term ones. It's when endorphins for pain relief and growth hormone are actually released in your body. Your body's doing all of its healing at night. So it is essential that you get the amount of sleep that you need. But if you're not getting REM, you could wake up after 7 hours and still feel tired and groggy. So cut back on inflammation and your sleep quality will improve. Another thing that will improve is your mood. So a diet that is free from inflammatory foods is actually going to help your body to create the neurotransmitters that your brain needs for good, brain health, reduced risk of depression, improved mental health. Your neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine are actually produced in the microbiome. The microbiome is the home of trillions of bacteria in your gut. We have a symbiotic relationship with our microbiome, and we could do a whole presentation on this, but trillions of years ago, when human life first formed, we went from being unicellular to multicellular, and from there it's just kind of grown. And things really haven't changed that much if you think about what a symbiotic relationship looks like dating back all those years. That bacteria is very much the same type of bacteria that lived all those years ago, but now they live inside of us and they help us to be healthier. The microbiome is home of trillions of diverse different bacteria that produce metabolic byproducts that help to reduce inflammation in our bodies. So if you're not consuming fiber and you're instead ingesting a high inflammatory level of foods, you're going to have a 1.4 increase in terms of likelihood of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's, depression, or some of these inflammatory associated mental health conditions. And this is evidence-based science at this point. It's not considered, alternative medicine or anything like that. 8 and 9, we group those together, as I was just alluding to the gut. So 70% of our immune system lives in our digestive system. If you're going to focus on having more anti-inflammatory foods in your diet, you're going to have better gut and immune health. Whole foods that are high in fiber is what is going to actually feed that bacteria. In turn, those trillions of bacteria in our gut are going to produce these short-chain fatty acids that specifically, one of them is called butyrate, which has been called out for all of its anti-inflammatory function. that essentially helps to regulate our immune system. And, more and more studies are being done on this every day to understand what the gut bacteria is doing for us, but they help to digest food. They produce the short chain fatty acids, and they help us with our neurotransmitters. So we really have to do our best to take care of them and make sure that they thrive. So speaking of that, when we're eating whole foods, we're discovering new flavors. I encourage you to challenge yourself to eat a rainbow every day. And that could include fruits, vegetables, spices, and herbs even. Spices like turmeric, ginger, cinnamon add great color and flavor and are also anti-inflammatory. Herbs like basil, cilantro, thyme, rosemary, they add lots of flavor, not any calories, but lots of potent nutrients as well. And they help to feed more bacteria. So think of every single plant and every single color as a very specific powerhouse of nutrients that's also going to help feed and grow this microbiome that you have. And your taste buds will continue to evolve and appreciate those diversity of flavors as you introduce them. So how do we get started? First thing I would recommend is getting familiar with label reading. Next, going to the grocery store, focusing on the perimeter, avoiding the middle aisles. That's where most processed foods live. Making healthy swaps. We're going to go through all of this in some slides to come, but I just want to give you an overview of what's next. Setting up your environment is really a key to being successful, and also doing some planning and planning out your meals. Knowing what you're going to cook each week is really key. With regard to learning the label, avoid foods that have more than 5 ingredients or ingredients that you can't pronounce or recognize. Don't be fooled by buzzwords such as natural flavor, sugar-free, fat-free, multigrain, 12-grain. These are all buzzwords that marketers tend to put on their labels because they know that people are interested in them. It's like clickbait for the label. They try to get you in and hook you in and hope that you don't turn the package around to see what's really in there. And don't buy ingredients with processed seed oils and trans fats. Those are definitely to be avoided. Things to do with the labels is, remember, ingredients are listed in descending order by weight, with the largest amount concentration-wise listed at the top. Pay attention to serving sizes. Sometimes those can be very deceiving. Choose foods that have minimal ingredients that are in their whole state, and minimize the consumption of foods that are low or have no fiber. Okay, so here's a quick exercise for us to do together. I actually used to buy this product against the grain. My daughter was diagnosed with non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So she can have gluten. It doesn't, cause her to have like a major immune response, or, she's celiac is like a serious condition where you have to avoid gluten. She avoids it for the most part and feels much better. But we were buying this pizza because at the time there weren't many gluten-free options. And then I really started diving into the label and becoming more savvy. And it's on my no list now. And I would like to invite you guys to check it out. The label on the right gives the ingredients. Let me know, spend a few seconds just perusing and give me your thoughts on the label and also the nutrient facts. Feel free to type in the chat. So I am having trouble seeing my chat window. There it is. You guys are being shy. I don't see anyone. Come on, just give me something. Wild guess. I won't call you out. Okay, I'll just go ahead and give you the answer. So look at where it says fiber, dietary fiber. It says 0 grams. It's so odd that this is a pizza that has 0 fiber. And one of the biggest issues with nutrition in this country is people do not consume enough fiber. So we're supposed to have upwards of 40 to 50 grams per day, depending on your sex and your size. But most people consume like 10 to 15. So we're grossly deficient in fiber consumption. And this is why. So this is considered a hyper-processed food. There's a million ingredients here that you probably could say you recognize, but yet there's no fiber. So that's definitely something that I would pay attention to going forward. Make sure your products that you're buying have fiber in them, at least 10 grams. You want to add up to like 40 or 50. So each meal should have 10. So here we go. We've got 12 grain or multi-grain. That's oftentimes on the cover of bread. What implies the food is full of healthy whole grains that are better for you. The reality is many of these types of grains may not even be whole, so they could be stripped of their nutrients. And the reason that food manufacturers do that is increases the shelf life and reduces the need for preservatives. And if you're doing that, you're taking the nutrition out of the product, you're taking the fiber out. So what to look for when you're buying a bread? 100% whole grain. Whole should be in front of every single grain. And if it's not, it's processed, and I would avoid it. But when in doubt, check out the fiber listing. No added sugar is another, oftentimes on labels, it's another way that they try to hook you in. It implies a food is free of sugar, it's healthier for you, lowering carbs, but in reality, they usually use artificial sweeteners, or it's a food that naturally contained enough sugar, it didn't even need a sweetener. So I encourage you to read the list, get familiar with names of artificial sweeteners. Sucralose, aspartame, sorbitol are a few, but there are dozens of sweeteners out there in disguise. And just check out the number of grams. We shouldn't have more than 10 grams per meal. This bottle of juice, for it to say no added sugar, is actually quite comical, because orange juice is loaded with fructose naturally, so it doesn't need any added sugar, but it's been stripped of all the fiber, especially it says pulp free. So what they're telling you is that we're giving you a food that's going to spike your blood sugar and deprive your microbiome. Next, we are going to avoid that. Tip when you're grocery shopping, and I know we're all busy, we like to use Instacart, Amazon Fresh. You're depriving yourself of the grocery shopping experience when you do that. Personally, when I'm at the grocery store, I get inspired for like what I'm going to cook or seeing what's local. And when you're doing this on the computer, you just don't get that chance. So I encourage you at least once or a couple of times a month, if you can get to the store, or more often if you can, get there, shop the perimeter, look at what's local, look at what's in season, and remember that if it has a short shelf life and it has an expiration date, that's actually a good thing, because it's whole food based. If your food can sit on a shelf for 6 to 12 months, it's loaded with preservatives, or it's been processed to the point that no bacteria is going to want to eat it, which means that we don't want to eat it either. Simple swaps we can be making. Every day there's choices we make at every meal where we can optimize our ingestion of whole foods. Things like dairy products, or plant-based milks and what have you. I know some folks don't consume dairy. If you're going to choose dairy products, they should be full fat and grass-fed. A cow that's been grazing on GMO type of corn or injected with hormones, that milk that is produced from that cow is going to be higher in omega-6, which means inflammatory fat. You don't want those omega-6s to outpace your omega-3s, because that does contribute to inflammation in your body. Try to choose the full fat also, because the fat helps to slow down the rate with which the food is metabolized, and our blood sugar as a result is more balanced. Steel cut versus rolled or instant in order of preference there. Steel cut is ideal, but I know it takes a long time to cook. If you're pressed for time, rolled oats overnight are good. Try to avoid the instant. Blood sugar spiker, very low in fiber, very processed. Similarly with the whole grain brown rice, that's more ideal versus the white. A raw honey or a maple syrup is always better than an artificial sweetener if you do want something like, to sweeten your coffee or tea or something like that. And a homemade vinaigrette is always better than a store-bought. I will recommend a brand in a couple of slides that I know uses avocado oil as opposed to the seed oils and is minimally processed. So that's just something to pay attention to. Store-bought dressings are famous for adding all kinds of additives. Simple swaps you can make if you like having a jam instead of something like Smucker's, which, as you can see, the second ingredient listed and third ingredient, the high fructose corn syrup wasn't enough, so they had to add the corn syrup too. We want to avoid that. Instead, you can make a delicious high fiber, low sugar. Well, there's that word again, sugar. It's still going to have sugar in it because it's got raspberries, but when you're consuming a raspberry with its fiber, the chia has fiber, you're having the antioxidants, you're having a more balanced experience for your blood sugar in your body. I've made this many times. You can use frozen raspberries to make this. It takes 10 minutes on your stove. You do a cup or two of raspberries, a few tablespoons of chia seeds, a few tablespoons of lemon juice, and maybe a tablespoon of maple syrup. It's absolutely delicious. My kids even eat it, which, they're a little picky as teenagers. Trail mixes are famous for including processed oils. Trader Joe's, just a handful. Sorry, Trader Joe's. I know we all love going there, or at least I know I do, but lately I've been going there with more and more caution because the seed oils seem to be finding their way in almost everything. You might think you're buying nuts and that's just nuts. And then you turn around, you turn the package over and it's, you find out that they've been heated, or they don't always indicate that nuts have been heated, but if it has oil in it, usually that means it's been cooked. But if you see raw nut on the package, on the label, that's a good sign. And raw nuts typically do not have sugar or oils added. If you make your own trail mix versus the store-bought kind, you can feel more confident that you're avoiding adding those inflammatory oils and probably saving a little bit of money too. Bread, that's a big one. So a lot of folks are worried about consuming bread because they feel like it's not part of a healthy diet. It can be, but you have to go with those breads that are baked fresh daily or fresh from bakeries that, something like When Pigs Fly, I think Neshoba, I think is another bakery, Iggy's. You buy those breads, they only have a handful of ingredients, but they will spoil very quickly because they don't have the preservatives. If you look at the Sara Lee bread, the first ingredient is enriched wheat flour. Why is it enriched? They've stripped all the nutrition out and they've added back in these vitamins, but they stripped it out because it'll extend the shelf life and it's cheaper for them to manufacture. They make more money when they can make something and it sits on the shelf for a really long time and doesn't spoil. But you are not getting any nutritional benefit from something like that. So as a healthy swap, trending right now, people are making sweet potato toast a lot, which is delicious and so easy. You can slice some sweet potato, put it in your toaster, slather it with a nut butter, some avocado, eggs or seeds, and you're skipping the oils and preservatives that you normally get with a bread and making toast. So as far as recommended resources, there are some key pieces of equipment that make this lifestyle so much easier that I totally recommend that you invest in if you're interested in having a more whole foods approach to your lifestyle. An Instapot, you can make all kinds of legumes. It's great for cooking vegetables, like you can stick, or even hard-boiled eggs. They're ready in 5 minutes and completely perfect. I've cooked beets in mine, sweet potatoes. I've cooked polenta, rice, beans. I've made stews and soups. So I highly recommend an Instapot, especially if you don't have a lot of time to cook because everything is made in 20 minutes or less, essentially. A soup, I think, could take up to 40, but it depends what you're putting in there. Having a high-powered blender is also key. You can use those to make sauces, dressings, and smoothies. A smoothie is hands down the quickest, easiest way to get all kinds of color and fiber into your breakfast every morning. I love to start my day with a smoothie. I put frozen cauliflower, frozen blueberries. I put protein powder and I throw in some yogurt for my, probiotics, chia seeds. It's just a great way to get, I mean, if I tried to sit down and eat a meal that had all of that, it just wouldn't be palatable and it wouldn't be easy. So any kind of blender that you have, but the high powered ones are even better because they can grind down flax and chia and things like that. Slow cookers are great. Set it up in the morning with what you want to have for dinner and don't have to worry about cooking when you get home from work. Or, you can have your oatmeal, your steel cut oats. You can stick those in there at 8 o'clock, before your day's done. And then in the morning you wake up and it's ready. So those are like little tips on how to like make these whole food preparations easier and weave them into your day. A microplane is awesome. A very simple tool for $10 at like Home Goods, but the zest of a lemon, an orange, a lime can be an integral part of a whole foods diet. There's a ton of antioxidants, but also a ton of flavor and color that you get from those foods. And if you don't have a microplane, those skins end up in the trash and they don't always get used. So I encourage you to invest in a microplane so you can make sure you maximize on all the nutrition that you get from these foods that you buy at the store. I alluded earlier to some brands that I trust. Elmhurst Farms, if you like plant-based milks. Plant-based milks are notorious for lots of additives. So be careful when you buy those foods, check the labels. They are notorious for things like carrageenan and guar gums as emulsifiers, which are really inflammatory towards gut health. But if you choose a brand like Elmhurst, it's made purely with 2 ingredients, typically like the nut and water, and that's it. Primal Kitchen is a company that was started by Mark Sisson. He was very big in the paleo world, but I do have to give him some kudos for starting this food brand that has lots of great dressings, and avocado oil is not considered inflammatory. So you can feel comfortable if you want a bottled dressing or marinade. The dressings do double as really good marinades in your slow cooker when you're making something like chicken or a stew or something like that. Purely Elizabeth, a little bit of a tongue twister. Another brand that is fantastic. Her grains, her granolas and cereals, and she does make a grain-free option for those that are not able to consume grains. Those are all delicious and make really high fiber, healthy options for breakfast. Other resources I recommend if you're interested in some books. I mentioned Food Rules by Michael Pollan. That is the classic, easy read. You could finish it in a couple of hours. How Not to Die by Michael Greger. Michael Greger is a doctor who started a nonprofit where his intention and focus and mission is to help people live a long life that's disease-free. And he approaches nutrition from more of a medical perspective. And he goes through some of the more medicinal benefits of consuming certain plant-based foods. So that is definitely a nice read that I have on my shelf that I enjoy recommending to folks. The Blue Zones by Dan Buettner, an awesome, awesome book. If you're interested in understanding the secrets of the centenarians, so the folks that live to be 100 years and older, his mission was to travel around the world and learn from those cultures. He's done that. He's an anthropologist by trade, but he writes for National Geographic magazine and has put this book together to help, create some content and share with the world what those secrets are for those folks that have such long-lived lives. Food blogs, there are so many good ones out there. These are some of my favorites. Why Reinvent the Wheel? These are my go-tos for recipes. That raspberry chia jam, I think I learned from Well Plated. Feel Good Foodie, she's awesome. You could find these bloggers on Instagram, or you could go directly to their blogs and sign up for their newsletters. You'll see tons of like really delicious, easy recipes that are whole food based. You will not regret it. So that concludes my presentation for today. I'd like to open up the floor to all of you if you have any specific questions on any of the content that we covered today, or if you just have anything, generally on your mind about nutrition. I'm going to go through the chat here and see what's come up. What advice do you have for cutting cost while eating whole foods? Everything is so expensive. Absolutely. My advice is to, first of all, do not be shy about shopping in the freezer aisle when it comes to produce. So certain things like berries can be very cost prohibitive right now. They're not in season, but when you're making a smoothie, they really do make or break the smoothie. I think the berries really do add so much sweetness and color, and they're so good for our brain health and our gut health. We don't want to exclude them from our diet. But I think I tried to buy strawberries the other day and they were like $9. So if you go to the freezer aisle to buy fruit when fruit is not in season, it's usually been picked at the peak of season and then flash frozen. The nutrient value and density is still very good when something is immediately frozen after it's picked at its peak. So shopping for frozen fruits and even vegetables like corn, you're not finding fresh corn right now, but sometimes you want to make tacos or a salsa that has corn in it. I'd recommend that you consider the frozen food aisle for those things that can be really pricey. And then I also recommend a lot of DIY. So you're going to get a lot more bang for your nutritional dollar and your wallet if you start to make more of your own food. So even something like, I'm going to buy the prepackaged salad from Trader Joe's. It's already washed and it's already mixed with the shredded carrots, and that's going to save me 5 minutes. Well, you're also paying 30% more for your produce when you're paying for the package and you're paying for someone to chop it. And by the way, we didn't talk about this in the presentation. When a salad is bagged, you might think it's a completely whole food, but they use a chlorinated solution to minimize the proliferation of bacteria in that produce. You're consuming greens that have been rinsed with chlorine. That residue could linger on your produce. There's no way to really test for that. So you should always wash your produce, even if it says pre-washed, and consider buying your produce out of a plastic bag. Again, you're going to save money. It's going to be fresher, and you're just going to reduce the amount of artificial things that go into your body. So I hope that helps. Buying in bulk is also really good. So things like I was talking about the trail mix at Trader Joe's. When you buy those individual packages, it's really easy to okay, grab and go, but you're also getting those inflammatory oils and you're just paying for that packaging. So why not just buy, a couple of 1-pound bags and pre-make your own little containers and then freeze what you don't need. So it stays fresh. You've got, your own creative mix going, and you're cutting out the oils and you're saving money. So there's definitely ways to save money. It just requires you to put a little more time. And I personally think it's worth it, but we're all busy. So you have to do what works for you. Sometimes buying the pre-cut Brussels sprouts, if that's the difference between you not having vegetables at all that night or doing takeout, go for the shredded Brussels sprouts and pay the extra 30%. You just have to weigh out the pros and cons. So I hope that answers that question. What are your thoughts on sprouted breads? I absolutely love sprouted breads. Thank you so much, Adele, for bringing that up. I forgot to mention that during our talk. So sprouted grains are grains that have even higher nutrient density than some of the whole grains that you'll find on the shelf in a bread that's been baked and packaged. So if you can do an Ezekiel, or I think there's a couple of new brands sprouting, no pun intended, out there all the time because it's become more and more popular, but you can buy sprouted quinoa. Sprouted grains in general are going to be more nutrient dense than their counterpart. What type of protein powder do you recommend? So I personally do like Vital collagen. I like the chocolate for my smoothies. It's delicious. I don't have, I don't have any issues with consuming collagen. I'm not a vegan. If anybody is vegan or vegetarian and they're interested in something that's non-animal based, feel free to email me. I have lots of different recommendations, but there are so many protein powders out there. I encourage you to just check out the label, make sure that there's no added sugars, because a lot of them do have added sugar in them. I use my blender to make almond milk. a 3-pound bag of raw almonds lasts me a few months for around $10 a bag. Fantastic. That is so great. I remember the days of using the nut milk bag and making it. I miss those days. Unfortunately, I have not had time, but I've been spoiled because I introduced myself to Elmhurst and now I'm hooked on their milks because they're so pure and delicious. Cashew milk is really good. You don't have to strain it. You can just blend it up in your blender and it's creamy and yummy. And yeah, it's really fun to make your own milk.